meeting. I assume everyone has a light week, at least those that are US based. As far as topics, does anyone have opens they want to bring up?
I guess if anybody has any topics about the release at the end of this week, things that they need in, I haven't seen any activity that suggests we have anything pending to go in this week.
Yeah, I think all the topics we talked about last week got in. Thank you, Michael and Michael.
I guess there, as a heads up, there's a bit of work that we're doing to kind of revitalize, I guess would be the word, some of the build instructions for EDK2. We've noticed pretty steady activity in the EDK2 discussions area of people running into build problems. And I think a lot of these are kind of like well-known historical problems. It's difficult to get things like the Visual Studio compiler and all of its dependencies set up, and the SDK and things like that on a new system, especially if you haven't done it before. So I think we're going to continue putting together some of this stuff a bit more, but I'll put a link here as a preview of like kind of the format that we're thinking about for the new set of instructions, particularly for building with Stuart. I think a lot of people, at least as far as I can tell, there seems to be some base level confusion when people come to the project about the build command versus Stuart. And I'm not sure it's exactly clear what the two offer, what the difference is, and why you would use one over the other, and what exactly they're doing differently, and that kind of stuff. So this document is kind of meant to focus a bit more on the Stuart side of things, and kind of use it to help people get pointed in the right direction on getting at least their environment set up for basic building. And then there's some examples in there of like different scenarios that you might walk through. Like for example, you just want to fix spelling errors, right? Like if I just want to go fix spelling errors in my package, how do I get rid of all the other stuff and just see if my spelling errors are fixed? Or like I want to build a new thing of base tools, how do I do that? So it kind of walks through different like user level scenarios, and then kind of points you in the right direction of the command to run, and different options that you have for that scenario and stuff like that. But if there's any feedback, like we could work that in now as well.
One question about this to you, Mike, Kenny. Is there any opposition, from kind of finding a path to start deprecating the old batch files and the documentation associated with those?
I think that's a discussion for the community as a whole as to the how people are using it, and if there's alternatives, make sure that they are aware of those and have tried those before they give an opinion. I think what Michael's putting together is a good start for this. And if we want to have that transition away from batch files and SH files for setting up the environment, then we need to make sure they know what the new way of doing it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the other things that we'll add that's not here at all at the moment is we're hopefully going to be able to put some container instructions in as well. one of the realizations, I was kind of running through the instructions in a sandbox in VM to see where some of the pain points were in particular. And a lot of the pain points are solved with containers, I think, particularly around getting things in your path set up the right way, installing the right SDK and everything like I was mentioning before, the C build tools and all that kind of stuff. Um, that kind of thing we can solve a lot better with containers than people manually doing it. So ideally, I think what we could get to is make it easy with a container to have a pretty ready to go environment to build in and work in, but then also provide the manual instructions if people want to set up their machine for the long term to be able to build as well. That's what I was thinking.
I think both are necessary. That sounds great. Michael, I don't know where we are on the Windows container. I know that we've done some good work around the Linux containers, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Linux container is getting really close. We are testing it out in our CI system, trying to catch any kind of edge cases. I think we could have I kind of have asked Chris, who on my team is working on this, to prepare something after the stable tag is released. As far as the Windows container, it's significantly less performant for the CI system because it's pulling down a lot of stuff, and most of that stuff is already installed on the VM images that we use. And so it is, wasteful in that perspective. For a local scenario, though, we still see a lot of questions and people having trouble setting up their Windows environment correctly and with all the right tools. And so I think that there is still a good reason to use it as a local development scenario to keep it in sync and up to date. And the first time you use it on a machine, obviously you'll have a 10 or 11 gigabyte file that is getting downloaded. But beyond that, I think that makes sense for a local scenario.
Yeah, and is it really that big? Even if you're using like the command line version of the Visual Studio tools and everything?
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm still working with Chris to try to shrink it. I think there's some steps we can do to combine it and create less fragmentation in the history of the image, which I think will shrink it. But it's still quite large. I think that's the main knock on Windows containers to date.
Okay. Well, I think I'd still rather take the time it takes to download that than go through all the manual steps.
Right. I mean, I think that's kind of been our position as well, is that once you get it, you have a well-known, consistent environment where the tools should all work and everything should work. So I think there's still great benefit from it. All right. Other topics for anyone? All right. Well, we can have a very fast meeting. Yeah, I guess that's it, unless anyone has any other opens.
Just real quick, is anybody waiting on me for code reviews?
I don't think I'm waiting on you, but I have that Code QL series out, and I think Leming's the only person that's responded to it so far. Thanks, Leming, for that. But I do need a few other people with a number of packages touched there. I guess I'll send another reminder email or something.
Yeah, I just haven't had time to do the detailed review, Michael. I did see a couple things that jumped out at me about doing assert versus error evaluation. But I think in some cases the asserts aren't required.
Yeah, I mean it's possible. I think as we went through this in the Mu code base, we probably had several hundred fixes, and there were a handful of places extra asserts were added that weren't needed. But just let me know, and I can
Sure.
update.
Nate, you did bring up a few weeks ago some work or some idea on using Clang, a newer version of Clang, and running cross-platform and building both on Linux and Windows, as well as, I think, on x86 and ARM64. Are you any closer to kind of bringing that to the public?
Well, as far as I know, it's already in the public tree.
So as far as I know, there's a Clang PDB toolchain that only builds x86. And then I think there's a Clang Dwarf toolchain that runs on Linux and will build a bunch of the ARM64 packages.
So last I heard, Clang, with the Clang linker, supports producing PECOF on both. And I believe we have done some tests to that effect and shown that it does work.
I don't
No,
think
correct.
today that is in the open source right now. I guess that's my point.
No, it is. It is totally, because we checked it in like last year.
Can you, okay, when you get a moment, can you point me to that toolchain, the toolchain tag? We've been playing around with this and have not had that same experience. A lot of the assembly files actually have directives that don't work for PE images.
You know, I think it might still be in staging. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay, great. If you do, send me an email offline and I'll take a look. Thanks.
Sure thing. Will do.
Anyone else have any topics?
There was one email on the mailing list from the ext4 file system maintainer requesting that package be moved from EDK2 platforms to EDK2. But in there as well was a pretty long complaint about EDK2 platforms maintenance. As one of the reasons for wanting to move it out of EDK2 platforms towards EDK2. So given that this forum is involved in, trying to improve like the CI and stuff like that on EDK2 platforms, I'm wondering if somebody can take a look at that feedback and see if we want to, maybe get them to help us on the EDK2 platform stuff or set direction on that. I don't want that to be a reason to move packages between repos.
Yeah, agreed. If you can send me a pointer, Mike, I can see what I can do.
Okay.
Is there a summary of their main complaints, or were they very diverse in terms of their topic areas?
It's a lot around the CI and things like that, and we have releases and stable tags, and we don't have those on platforms. So many of the things we've talked about in this forum before.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I'm interested to see how many of them line up with some of the Bugzillas that we've mentioned before. Maybe we can get some work or attention focused on those.
But I think I'm looking at his email now, and I think it makes sense and it lines very much so with what we've talked about before. I mean, but I do still, I think one of the comments we talked about before was I think EDK2 platforms doesn't make sense to have a lot of feature code in it. And we've only put it there because of for other reasons. So I think that I still would support ext4, moving to a different repo with a different set of versioning and different set of features. and keeping it away from platform code and the scope that platforms have.
Yeah, I found that link for you, Sean. It's in chat.
Okay. Perfect. Mike, do you think if we put EK2 platforms as a discussion topic sometime in probably early December, we could get a conversation on this forum? Or is there a better place for it?
I guess if we're gonna, suggest a different way to organize our repos, we have to start somewhere and come up with some, problems, issues that we perceive with the current organization and why we would suggest any changes from the current one. We had good reasons for where we stand today, so, but that was a while ago.
Okay. I mean, Nate, is that something that you guys also feel like it should change? Or as someone who, is a maintainer on a bunch of that code, you like how it is today?
I don't know. Like, I'm certainly open-minded, Sean. Yeah, I mean, we can maybe have a session and talk about what you think.
Okay, sounds good. Again, we consume some of that in Project Mu, and so we do have some experience integrating it. We've had some pain, so that's means we do have some opinions.
And it'd
fair.
be interesting to know if the opinions remain the same if we were to put it on a diet for the content that's no longer being maintained. So it's is it a problem in its current state, or would it be a problem, would it have the same problems if we were to actually determine the actual maintained content and remove the non-maintained content into other branches or out of the repo?
Yep, that's fair.
Is there a firm plan to do that analysis, or is that not really tentatively planned, I guess?
Yeah, I think it's like as before, we know that content exists in there, but nobody's stepped up to do the work.
Okay.
And plus, I mean, I think we just kind of started talking about it, right? I mean, we've talked about it off and on, I guess, but nobody's really taken action, right?
Yeah, I think I've talked about it for a while, but I'm not a maintainer on anything in the repo. So
Yeah, I mean, I've talked about it as well. It's just, where do you spend your time, right?
yeah.
Mike, I don't know if you have an opportunity. I think Leif was instrumental in setting that up. I don't know if there's others that don't attend this that you might have reached to through the stewards that obviously we want their buy-in. Can you maybe reach out and see if there's a way to get them together on a meeting, or if we're going to do it all asynchronous? But I think we would need, or we would desire to have more representation, especially from the ARM platforms that are in there.
Of course, yeah. What I guess if I wasn't clear about this, what I was suggesting is I think we've got enough people in this forum to talk about the issues that we're aware of and maybe provide some options and a recommendation. And then we can put that out to the entire community as a discussion point. And then I'm happy to take that to the stewards as well. But instead of just one person going off and doing the work all by themselves, I think we can use a forum like this where we have, I think that the people that try to look at the project as that wider view, it's multiple repos, there's platforms, there's tools, there's CI. I think we've got enough people in this forum to put together a pretty solid set of options. And then we can send that out to the wider community for discussion.
Okay, that sounds good. I think, so tentatively, I'll try to put it in the discussion forum that's for this, meeting. And maybe schedule it for 2 weeks from now. That would be December 5th, US time. As a topic, I think that gives us, we won't have much by the 28th. So that gives us some time to try to put together some ideas, and then we can have a discussion on the 5th. Does that sound reasonable?
Yeah. And you might reach out to, I know Andrew Fish has been able to attend this meeting once in a while, so you might reach out to him and let him know about that agenda topic. I don't think this one is friendly for Leif to be able to join directly.
Okay. Fair enough. All right, any last topics before we drop off? Okay, thanks, everybody. I will have this meeting next week. Like I said, I don't know how much will get done, but we can at least check in and see if there's anything new to discuss. Thank you.